You think I talk fast normally? Yeah. All right, so we're going to pick up in Mark 5, verse 21. Rich left us off last week with Jesus healing the demoniac, sending the demons into the pigs, them rushing down the cliff, and the people of Gerasenes basically saying, could you please leave our territory? Which was an interesting response to a demoniac that had been set free and sitting there in his right mind and testifying to how awesome Jesus was. So he said, can I go with you? Jesus says, no, you go home and tell how awesome I am and tell your story. And he did. And as Rich said, we'll pick up that story in chapter 8 when we get there. But right now we find Jesus jumping back in his boat and crossing back to Capernaum. And so look in verse 21 of Mark 5. It says, when Jesus had crossed again to the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be well and live. And he went with him, and a great crowd followed and thronged about him. And so Jesus doesn't hardly get on the shore, and the crowd is there. And in the crowd, we're going to find out, is an unnamed woman and the synagogue ruler of Capernaum, and his name's Jairus. Now, he's wealthy, he's respected, he's prominent. Everybody knows Jairus. And the fact that he went to Jesus, and not just went to Jesus, but threw himself at Jesus' feet, he basically put everything on the line, all right? He is a part of the religious establishment. Up until this point, the religious establishment has basically dogged Jesus out. They've called him of the devil. They've dismissed everything that he's doing. And yet, Jairus, when he hits the crisis of his little girl, all right? How many dads with little girls? We know what that looks like, right? And we're going to do whatever it takes. And so Jairus is like, I don't care about my job. I don't care about my religion. I don't care about my prominence or my wealth. I care about my little girl. And he knew the only place he could go to get what he needed for his daughter was Jesus' feet. And so he threw himself at Jesus' feet. And he begged him earnestly, saying, could you come to my home? And Jesus is like, let's go, right? Because Jesus knows exactly what's going on. And the crowd is probably blown away. And so they're like, we're going too. And so the Bible says they thronged to him, all right? Now, have you ever used that word? Hey, yeah, we went to a concert and the people thronged about, right? We don't use that word. So what does that word mean? It means a massive crowd, thousands and thousands of people mosh pitting together. And you ever been in a crowd where you don't have to walk, right? It just carries you, and you're like, okay, I guess we're going this way. We did that in New Orleans at New Year's Eve, and Beth goes, don't you ever do that to me again. And we haven't done that because we're old now, right? So that's what's going on. This massive crowd is thronging about. Everybody's touching and pressing in, and you don't even have to walk, basically. It's being carried. We're all going to Jairus' house. Enter verse 25. There's a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all she had, and was no better, but actually grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garment, I will be made well. Immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power had gone out of him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? The disciples looked at him and said, you see the crowd pressing about you, and yet you say, who touched me? And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of this disease. All right, so we left off with a throng of people, right? Mosh pit of crowd. And yet there's one lady in the crowd that goes, you know, I have got this faith that Jesus is who he says he is, and if I can just get close enough to him to touch his garment, I'm good. And so she's got this plan. And she's like at the end of herself. Jairus is wealthy. He throws it all on the table. She's destitute. She's bankrupt. She's used everything she had to try to get made well, and the doctors actually made her worse. So she's got this plan. This plan that violates basically every law in the society and the system of their culture. Number one, she's got a discharge of blood. She's unclean. She shouldn't even be around people, much less in a throng of crowd. She shouldn't be touching people. She shouldn't be around them. She should definitely not be touching a teacher. And yet, despite that, she's laying down all of the excuses, the reasons she shouldn't be there. And she's going, but she's got her plan of, if I just touch his garment, I'm good. I don't need to talk to him. I don't need to touch him physically. I just need to get a brush of what he's wearing. And so she goes in. And it looks like it's great success. She comes up behind him. He doesn't even know she's around. She touches him. She sneaks back out. And then everything stops. Because as soon as she touches his garment, Jesus is like, wait, something just happened. Power has gone out of me. It's first use of this word power. And it's get our English word dynamite from. All right? Jesus said, dynamite just got out of me. And he stops everything, this throng. And it just hushes. And he's like, who touched me? And his disciples are like, you've lost your mind. Everybody's touching you. Everybody's touching us. They thought he was being foolish. He's like, no, somebody touched me. And I felt power go out. And so now the lady's like found out, but she thought she had a good plan. And now she's got to make a decision. Do I sneak away or do I go public? If I go public, I could get stoned. I'm not even supposed to be here. But she's like, well, maybe I won't get stoned because I'm healed. Maybe I'm good now. But what if Jesus gets mad because I touched him and tried to sneak away? What if he takes away the healing? Like, all this crazy stuff's probably going through her brain. Like, what am I going to do now? She's got a decision to make. Bail or go public? So she comes up to Jesus. And she says, it was me. Now, did Jesus know? Absolutely knew, right? He knew it was. He could have called her out, but he's like, no, who touched me? You got to come on your own accord. You've got to come public. You ever heard people go, oh, my faith with Jesus it's a private matter. Jesus like, that sounds good in the Western culture, right? But it's not truth. It's not how we roll. If you confess me with your mouth, if you believe in your heart, if you go public with me, if you're baptized in my name publicly and associate with me, there's strength in that. There's testimony in that. There's power in that. But if you sneak away in private and go, you know what, I got what I needed, I'm good, that's not what Jesus wanted for her. He wanted her to testify with her own lips what had just taken place. And so she did. Man, have you ever heard a lady tell her whole story, right? She's got a lot to say. And so the whole crowd stops, right? And everything's going down. And Jesus goes, who touched me? And she comes and she tells him the whole truth, the whole story. And I'm thinking that's not a 30-second job, right? That is like, we're going to be here for a while. But Jesus has got a plan in that. Meanwhile, Jairus is tapping his foot, right? Oh my goodness, this was not on the plan. We are not supposed to be stopping for a public testimony. We got to get to my house. Then he's like, okay, so Jesus, you already healed her. She's good. Let's go. Because we still have work to do. We have an acute situation. This lady had a chronic situation. Couldn't she have just waited? No, but she didn't wait. So, okay, let's put this on hold. We'll all come back. We'll hear your story. Let's go to my house. My daughter is dying. But Jesus is using this public testimony of this woman, not just for her sake, but for the crowd's sake, and especially for Jairus' sake. And he's dying inside because he's a guy. And we get that. He's in such a hurry. Why? Because he's on Chronos time, right? I know sickness is going to take my daughter to death according to my watch. And Jesus is not on Chronos time. Jesus is like, I'm doing a lot in a little bit of time, and you guys don't have any clue what it is, because I'm on God's time. I'm on Kairos time. And he wants to continue working in Jairus' faith and in his life by the testimony that this woman's going to give, telling her whole truth, her whole story. So they're hanging out, and she's telling her story. And Jairus is dying inside. And then verse 35 happens. While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." All right? So dads, what happens when the messengers come? Hey, nice try, Bubba, but your daughter's dead. Don't bother Jesus anymore. Just go home. Tend to your family. Comfort your wife. Man up. His worst fears had become his reality. And not only had he lost his daughter, but now he's got to start spinning, right? We spin so fast. I just lost my daughter, but hey, I just threw myself at Jesus' feet. Like, I've just lost everything. I went public with my faith in Jesus, and now I've lost my daughter too. I'm going to be that woman. I'm going to be destitute. I'm going to be bankrupt. I'm going to have nothing. I'm going to be an outcast in my own community. And Jesus knows all this is going on, right? So he interrupts the news bearers, the messengers. He's just like, wait. Like, stop talking. He looks at Jairus and he says, "Don't fear, only believe." Keep faithing. That word is like an eternal word. It's keep on keeping on as you keep on, right? Believe as you've believed as you continue believing. Because he believed when he came, right? What do you believe? I believe Jesus can heal my daughter's sickness. Jesus said, take that belief that you came with, keep doing it, and put it into a future tense of believing for what I want to do now. So he gives us this word of faith, this word of hope of keep doing what you started with. Don't stop, but keep doing it for the future. Why? Because our wait is Jesus' plan. There was not an interruption to what Jesus was doing there. The news bearers did not bring information to Jesus. He's like, "Ooh, blew that one. Shouldn't have listened to the lady's whole story. Should have cut her off halfway through." No, he knows exactly what's happening. And in the wait, he's not interrupted by it. In the wait, he's not fretting about it. In the wait, he's not put off by it. His plan is in the wait. And we're like, we don't like that plan. That's a bad plan. Your plan should be immediately. Jesus ran to Jairus' house. But that's not how he rolls sometimes. Just like last week, when the disciples woke Jesus up from the boat and he spoke peace, they're like, yeah, now he's getting it, right? He didn't make us wait 12 hours before he spoke peace. He wakes up, he speaks peace, the wind stops, the wave stops. That's how Jesus should be rolling. But this week, that's not how it is. And the news bearers say, don't bother him anymore. And Jesus says, you don't stop believing. Do not fear. So he gets to the house. But not everybody gets to go to the house. Verse 37. Jesus allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And they came to the house of the synagogue ruler. And Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he entered, he said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside, took the child's father and mother, and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. All right, so the crowd is thronging. Jesus goes, okay, you stop here. Now it's a private thing. So he grabs his boys, Peter, James, and John, the dad, and he goes to the house. And when he gets to the house, there's more thronging. There's commotion. There's a crowd. And you're like, why? Because in that culture, and this kind of tells you how far the journey was, by the time they get to the house, the professional mourners are there. Friends of the family are there. Grandma and aunts and second aunts are there. Because they're all in the community. Everybody that knows this little girl is there. As well as these guys that get paid to come and give honor to the dead. How do they do that? They make a lot of noise. They weep and they wail. And it's to honor the daughter's memory. It's not a bad thing. It's just a weird culture to us. Well, Jesus shows up and he goes, what are you guys making such a commotion for? And they're like, duh, she's dead. That's what we do. He's like, she's not dead. She's sleeping. Well, guess what? This is when they laugh, but they're not just laughing. They're mocking him. They're like, you don't know anything. We wouldn't have been called to come and weep and wail and mourn and get paid for it if she wasn't dead. You don't think mom knows that her daughter's dead? So they not just laugh at him, they mock him. And his response, get on out of here. He puts them out. He's like, we're not doing this right now. Jesus wants quiet. He wants peace. He wants to reveal himself in ways that he has not done that just yet. And so he grabs Peter, James, and John. He grabs mom and dad, and he walks in to where the child is. Verse 41, taking her hand, he said to her, Talitha Kumi, which means little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age, and they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and he told them to give her something to eat. All right, the crowd's laughing. He puts them out. He takes mom and dad. He goes in. And some translation says he gets down next to her. All the translations say he takes her hand, and then he speaks. He speaks Talitha Kumi. It's Aramaic. What's it mean? It means little girl. But it means so much more than that. In English, it means little girl. But in Jesus' language, it means a term of endearment. It means he knows this little girl. He gets down next to her, he takes her hand, and he says, sweetie, honey, it's time to get up. Which is exactly what you'd say to somebody that was sleeping. You ever roused your little girl? I mean, sometimes we get the bullhorn, right? Sometimes you need the bullhorn. The best way to do it, though, is you snuggle up next to them. You grab their hand, or you brush their hair. Beckaboo, time to get up. Sweetie, honey, it's time to get up. And that's exactly what Jesus is pulling off. He knows this little girl, and he's like, sweetie, it's time to rise. Because to him, death is like sleep. It's no big deal. Honey, it's time to be resurrected. So she gets up. She walks around. Sickness is gone. Death is gone. He looks at mom and dad, and he says, she needs something to eat. So practical. So awesome. He goes, but there's one instruction. Don't tell anybody about this. What? Jairus is like, I just threw myself at your feet publicly. It was publicly declared that my child's dead. You don't want me to tell anybody about this? Jesus is like, this is a private matter. This is between us. And he left. Now he walks out. Guess what the crowd's saying? Everything. The reporters are there. Jesus vaporizes, no comment, and keeps on going. What did they come to Jesus for? The lady, man, she was done. 12 years of bleeding to death. She's done. She's like, I just need to stop bleeding. I just need a physical healing. And Jesus is like, oh, we'll do that. You'll do that through your faith of just touching my garment, but I got so much more for you than just to stop the bleeding. And as she went public with her testimony, Jesus said to her, your faith has saved you. Some translations say your faith has healed you, but they mean the same thing. It means physical restoration and spiritual transformation. Jesus is like, oh, you could have snuck away and got your physical healing and been good to go as far as you're concerned. But when you made the decision to go public and you proclaimed your faith publicly, guess what? I took care of the spiritual part of that too. You are made whole. Go in peace, go in wholeness, go in completeness. And that lady walked away going, dude, I thought I just wanted physical healing, and Jesus took care of the whole package. Jairus, he trusted Jesus to heal his daughter from the sickness, right? The last thing he probably had on his mind was, but if she dies, he can raise her from the dead. So Jesus stops and he goes, don't fear, believe, keep believing, believe for the future. But Jairus had to walk through the death of his daughter in order to experience all that Jesus had for his family. That's not what we're willing to give up. Oh, I'll trust you for the sickness part, but do not take my daughter. Jesus says, just wait. Don't fear. Keep believing. I'm doing something here. And in each one of our lives, we come to Jesus with this little nugget of faith, right? If you could just heal me physically, or if you could just touch my daughter's sickness, Jesus goes, okay, that's the beginning point, but I want to do so much more. Ephesians 3:20, so much more than you can ask or imagine. Your faith in here, that's good, but I want you to faith for way more than you can even ask for, even more than you can dream of, even more than you could imagine in your wildest fascinations. You need to go there with me, but it's going to cost you way more than what you're willing to give up. The lady's like, man, just a private sneak, touch and go. Do not make me go public. Jairus is like, let me just trust you for the sickness. Do not make me give up my daughter to death. Jesus is like, I want the whole thing. I want you to lay out all. But you know what? He didn't say that at the beginning. He just says, I'll meet you where you're at. But we ain't going to stay there. As you faith me for that, I'm going to stretch you for the don't fear, keep believing. And then I'm going to do more than you can ask or imagine. But you got to keep walking with me. If Jairus had just bolted, if he had gone out in the wilderness to wail and weep on his own because he just lost his daughter, he would have missed everything Jesus had for him because he would have tapped out early. Jesus is like, keep walking this with me. He's got a plan. But that plan always includes stretching our faith more than we can think. He wants us to trust, to have that faith. And usually it always includes a wait period. And what do we do in the wait period? Some of us just like, I'm done. And I asked. Then this lady starts talking. She now stop talking. I'm done. The lady looks at the crowd. She's like, oh my gosh, the crowd's so big. I've never seen such a thronging crowd in my life. She had to make the decision to go in deep, go into the center of it, and persevere in the wait to get there. How do we feel about the wait? We disdain the wait. Jesus is like, there's always a purpose in the wait. I don't make you wait to play with you. I make you wait for a plan and a purpose. You ever condemned God for the wait? Come on. Yes, we condemn God for the wait. I've been reading Job. I'm like, it's not good to do that. Because when he does speak, we're like, oh, never mind. Do we trust God's love in the wait? Or do we doubt God's love in the wait? God, if you really loved me, would you make me wait? Are you kidding? To put me through this? You equate that to unconditional love? Isaiah 40:13, who has measured the Spirit of the Lord? Or what man shows him his counsel? Romans 11:34, for who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? We raise our hand sheepishly going, well, I've tried to do that, right? I've done that before. I've counseled God on how we should have done things. I'm still smarting from a couple of things that I'm like, I wish you had done that different. I really wish you had done that different. But that's not what his plan was. So he uses the, you should have done it different. He uses, you should have done it quicker. He uses, I wish you had done it another way, to humble us, to acknowledge that he is God, and to not get offended on the way he does his business, and then to trust, to turn around in humility, to trust into faith that his plan's way bigger than our plan, so that we can trust him for the next one and the next one, and have faith for that, to be able to share that with others, of building up their faith when they go through it. We can go, let me just tell you a little bit of my story. I'm not saying I know how you feel. I'm saying I've walked a portion of this. Let me encourage you with my story, with my testimony. Because it's not just about us. We sang about it all morning. It's about God's glory, to testify to his goodness, even in the hard, the goodness in the wait, the goodness that I wish you had done it different. Be able to testify that God is still a good God, regardless of how I feel about it. So we have to know his character. We have to know his love. We have to know who he is through his word. We have to trust in that. So this morning, Jesus says, hey, stop fearing. I know you believe. Keep on believing. But believe for more than what you're believing for today. Because I got a plan in it. Let's pray.